Welcome to NeuroNoodle's Neurofeedback and Neuropsychology podcast featuring tech legend Jay Gunkelman. He is the man who has read well over 500,000 brain scans. Our goal is to provide information and promote options for better mental health. The NeuroNoodle podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you. Mindmedia.com. Get the latest EEG and neurofeedback technology from mindmedia.com. Their semi-dry sensor cap is a wonder to see, and their EEG amplifiers have been trusted in the field for decades. Their neurofeedback and QEEG courses will get you up to speed in no time. Visit mindmedia.com now. All these mental tests.
Well, and some of them are archaic. Though, because they have history of who has what kind of test score, they kind of have some sort of a validity, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily a level playing field as a scoring system.
Well, specifically, the Ohio State quarterback, CJ Stroud, I believe he tested poorly in a S2 test. Is that right? Is that like you're connecting
which is a cognitive test, and kind of how quickly you can make decisions, stop and change decisions, that mental agility and speed. So you can be the biggest and the fastest, but if they feel like you're going to be impulsive, well, what's that going to translate into? Well, offsides.
The disparity in talent is greater in college than is in the NFL. Everybody's good in the NFL. So the difference, it's faster. So you have to be able to consume that much more information and make decisions quickly. And I guess being a quarterback, you're going to have to process all the things that the defense is showing you. And this test supposedly could be a deal breaker.
Well, it could be. The question is whether the test itself is, in fact, something that's somewhat valid. There's sections of the test that test, quote, general knowledge. Well, there's cultural and regional general knowledge is different. So that has to be looked at a little bit with respect to bias.
You mean like the Wonderlic test?
Oh yeah, the Wonderlic. And especially because there's personality and motivation assessment within it, and those are essentially trick phrasing. Actually, there's a prep course like a pre-SAT test. You know,
LSAT, MCAT. Yeah,
you can take you can take the Wonderlic and in various forms to see if you can pass it fast enough. There's a speed of answering that's there's a time pressure to complete the test. So that they've got practice tests, and so you can go in cold, or you could have spent I don't know what the hell it costs, but there's probably a price to pay to
good chump
to take
change.
All and if you've got sponsors and whatnot, you can afford to do these kinds of things. But the personality and motivation tests the pre-test that they have will teach you the logic behind these tricky assessments and how to avoid the many pitfalls they present. I've helped design tests within the neuroscience world, and one of the things you have to avoid when you create a test is trick questions. It can't
Yeah.
be some nuance of the phrasing. There's a
Double
freaking double
negative.
negative that makes it, doesn't even make it logical or something. So you have to make uh, the test something other than a gotcha.
Yeah.
Um, I would personally like to see them assess things with an objective metric using basically neurophysiology, measurable neurophysiology. You can have a primed go no go test and check for omission errors, commission errors, reaction time, variability. The EEG assessment of it would look for potential paroxysms or areas that might be problematic for the individual. Um, you would end up having an idea what their background alpha frequency was, which is somewhat proportional to the ability to semantic and declarative memory. How well are you going to learn? The
Yeah.
coaches have coaching sessions, and you've got to learn. And if you've got an ADD overlay, that can be identified. That kind of an assessment where the EEG and the event-related potentials were assessed, I think would give you a non-bias assessment. There's no racial, no cultural, there's no regional,
Yeah.
a fast reaction time is a fast reaction time. And at the same time, if you have a fast reaction time and in a go no go test, you've got an impulsivity where you have commission errors, that's going to be a problem. So the the ability to assess actual brain function in an objective way, I think, would be very good, and it gives you a gigantic baseline test,
Yeah.
and as with respect to any potential concussion. You already have their essentially a CPT task with the EEG being recorded, and that gives you a tremendous amount of information.
I wonder if any of these sports agents do this because, we're talking, difference of millions of dollars between each draft slot. And these agents foot the bill to send these kids to Arizona or Florida to do this training to game the combine, to get good stats, to get their draft capital up. I wonder what the agents would, if you had a neuro guy there, you would obviously do the EEG, and then you would work on the anterior cingulate. I don't know what.
Well, it depends upon what the person had. Is every phenotype has a way to play it. It's like poker.
Yeah,
You've got a hand that's been dealt to you genetically, and there's a way to play it. You can win a game with a pair of twos, but you got to be damn good at bluffing. So
good
uh,
timing.
if I might,
Yeah,
uh, what you could be doing is an event-related potential. And an event-related potential is essentially a task where you perceive stimuli and end up having to respond, kind of like an IVA or a TOVA test, only with the brainwaves recorded, so they can actually see the detail of the brain's response and processing. So the overall signal of the event-related potential can be broken down with independent component analysis into normative components where they know the proper latency and proper distribution within the brain where it should be happening. This is a visual CPT task at the early point here at about 100 milliseconds. You get a big surge at the back of the head. That's the arrival of the sensory stimulus. Shortly thereafter, you see it being processed in the left and right temporal area to kind of figure out what is it and where is it what is it I just saw. This is an auditory stimulus, and that occurs at the top of the head. Most people think that's kind of a funny spot. Auditory cortex is in the temporal area. And why are you looking at the top of the head for the auditory cortex response? Well, the auditory cortex is enfolded into the temporal parietal junction and is not oriented out. The pyramidal cells are oriented up and in. So you actually see the summation at the top of the head, again, at about 100 milliseconds. But once you've got the stimuli and you've figured out what is the stimuli, what does it mean, then you're either going to have to engage the motor strip, and this is a motor engagement potential. It's a little bit later than all this assessment. Or you're going to have to inhibit. It could be a no-go, and you have to inhibit it. So the go and the no-go are going to identify inattentive or areas of commission, people that are impulsive. And those are two things that are not helpful neurocognitively. So these would be very objective. I mean, they're the size of the waveform and the location that it should be seen at are all seen with age-adjusted normative values. And then after you've actually done the go and the no-go and all of that, the signal gets to the front of your head at the anterior cingulate. And at the anterior cingulate, you basically end up holding a model of what you think you should have been doing, the instructions on how to do the test. And if you did well, that's the signal arrives there. If you have an obsessive compulsive trait, that component's not going to work properly, and you get an error message from the anterior cingulate, even though you've performed perfectly well. So a CPT task, the omissions and commissions and reaction time and variability could be perfect. But if this anterior cingulate component fires off and it's an abnormal component, then what you've got is an anterior cingulate OCD. They perform perfectly, but they have an obsessive compulsive trait. And this as a set of tests ends up being absolutely objective. There's no bias one way or another. It identifies both sensory as well as executive components. And it gives you a pretty good idea about, again, attentional skill set and impulsivity. Impulsivity is going to be jumping the line, making stupid impulsive moves, and inattention is going to be being beat on the line, missing a cue, and not being as good as at learning what the coaches are teaching. So this kind of an objective measure of the brain's function, combined with a QEEG assessment to look at the brain's normative function, those two combined end up giving a really good objective measurement of performance, brain performance. And it's not, again, trick questions about personality issues, which that's a judgment call if there ever was one. For goodness sakes, I sure hell can't talk about personality. So
me either, Jay. Now this is more than just the NFL, right? I mean, if a company were smart, some of them are doing it. Wouldn't you run some future prospects through this to kind of know what you're working with? And I don't know if confidentiality comes into play, but you need to make sure, like if you're doing alpha theta training, get people ready to consume information to learn about a corporation and how to sell or how to do finance or whatever. Uh, wouldn't it make sense for the corporations to do something like this?
Well, in fact, it's helpful because um, let's say you've got quite a few employees, and in order to optimize their performance, you can look at their brain function. And if there's, let's say there's somebody that's got excess frontal alpha and they've got a bit of a vigilance or attentional or affective regulatory issue, neurofeedback or DC stim, there's ways to end up helping your employees' mental health or brain function. An objective thing. You don't have to go to diagnose it. Frontal. Whoever got pejorative about frontal alpha. I mean, oh, you got frontal alpha. Well, so what? Well, you've got depression, you've got obsessive compulsive disorder, you've got ADD. I mean, those have the pejorative implications, and the EEG finding and treatment basically end up getting past all that. And again, if you've got baseline information, if there's a significant change, a concussion, a blow to the head, if there's a sudden change in performance, you can look at all of this and try to identify what the issue is. And one of the things about the EEG recording itself is during 10 minutes of eyes closed, you can do the vigilance regulate. You can measure things based on vigilance and assess to a certain extent the whether the person is going to be able to maintain vigilant focus across time. The Europeans have been doing vigilance modeling since Benty in the 1960s, but Gerald Ulrich wrote a book on theoretical interpretation of the EEG much more recently. He's a retired psychiatrist from Berlin, very classically educated. It's a very interesting book. But you can actually literally see whether the person is going to be able to maintain a vigilant focus across time. And there are a lot of people that their eyes are closed and they can't maintain an awake state for 5 minutes. And if you can't stay awake for at least 5 minutes, you've got a problem with your sleep at night. Sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, circadian rhythm problem. You're making bad sleep habits of some sort. There, you've got to look at what's going on with your sleep. So you can end up making an intervention based on a change in performance if you can see suddenly there's a worsening in their ability to maintain a vigilant state. And all that's assessed objectively. And the vigilance, there's a vigilance algorithm, Vigil. It's an algorithm that can rate your vigilance level. So it's not even a judgment call. So,
Jay, would you lump this all under peak performance?
It's a basic objective performance assessment, and it allows you to potentially optimize performance if you see issues. For instance, you get perfectly good detection of the signal, but there's a processing issue in the temporal lobe, and you go back to the EEG and you see, oh well, there's 6, 7, 8 hertz slow alpha in that temporal lobe. You can train that away and improve the processing of sensory information so that the timing on your sensory processing is going to end up influencing how quickly you can actually react. If you see an excessively sized early component, you basically have somebody that has an emotional overcharge, and at that point, you can assess whether the person is in need of some training on their autonomic nervous system so that they can manage their affect. You don't want somebody kind of losing it on the field, and the pressure of the game has been known to occasionally have people snap and go at somebody, and
Well, the quote unquote busts that have happened, it's usually been a quarterback, and it hasn't been a physical problem, it's been a mental problem.
Yeah.
Where they can't make the adjustment.
Yeah. And you can monitor brain function really well. The test itself now is capable of being done with dry sensor electrodes very quickly. It's not a difficult procedure for the ERP. You sit in front of a computer screen and click a mouse for about 10, 15, 20 minutes. And so you're in and out on the assessment. It's not something that takes a day. You're in and out within an hour. And it's objective data, and you can be tracked across time to see if there's a treatment or a training going on to try to improve something. In fact, whether it is improving it or not.
And then getting back to companies, Jay, these assessment tests that are out there where you create a baseline of, let's just say, quote unquote, your successful employees, and then everybody that comes in that you recruit, they take this test, and it's supposed to say, well, these people are more likely to be successful.
Yeah.
I've never seen that. I've tried them, and I've never. Should they work? Is that possible?
All that kind of stuff is controversial. There's a Hagman group in the Silicon Valley that assesses Fortune 500 finalists. If you've got CEO, the last 2 or 3 people that you're considering for a CEO position at Boeing or some big Fortune 500 company, they will do an assessment, and that you've got to sign off on it, and it's they basically give paper and pencil type testing that has had criterion keying on high level executives, and it's not like they're looking. It's like giving an MMPI but not using the MMPI scoring. You've got your own score. You've got your own pattern you're looking for. So that's what they've been doing, and obviously that as a company they've done well. So and it's kind of, again, the criterion keying of you've got enough successful executives that have been tested to end up having a pattern established. So it's not a startup. We think these are the 5 things that you need to track, and it turns out 2 of them are important, but the others are just random. So,
well, just like the executives and the players in the NFL, I mean, the difference between first place and 10th place is so minuscule. You're looking for that little edge, and I think that's what they market, that will give you an edge. So,
well, I proposed the QEEGs to the Hagman group, but their and their CEO thought it was a fabulous insight into the brain function and the individual's kind of core function. However, the marketing people thought it was too much like Polygraph, and and so they thought that there would be some balking at that. The paper and pencil stuff they could get away with pretty easily, with people signing off on, you could be the CEO, but you got to take this test, sign here. There's a little incentive coercion
But I mean, a
on that.
polygraph, that's biofeedback, right?
Well, you can do biofeedback to try to beat a polygraph.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, put a
Well,
tack in, put a tack in your shoe and step on it to get an emotional response. Uh,
that's all you got to
now,
do. All right, duly noted.
you can learn to control heart rate and electrodermal responses and all of those things, including pupillometry. Yeah, but it takes feedback. It takes time. You have to learn how to control these things, and uh, not who, who's got an incentive to spend the time to learn how to control all that kind of stuff. I guess if you're
Spies.
CIA or something, But
Yeah.
in the biofeedback, neurofeedback world, Peter Rosenfeld was a doctor who ended up specializing in event-related potentials, and he went into truth detection, lie detection kind of stuff with ERPs, um, uh, and was involved at a high level with just that kind of spy testing
Right.
and litigation testing. You can present a picture and identify whether the person has seen it before.
Now, if you're
That
going to send somebody on a rocket ship, you want to make sure you got somebody that's all there. So neurofeedback seems to be okay for NASA. Why doesn't it?
Yeah.
If NASA's
In
been
fact,
using,
let's say you take off and you got some gigantic new spaceship and there's 10 people up on Mars all hanging out together and somebody starts to kind of lose it a little bit. Well, you've got to have treatment and assessment, and the EEG assessment and blood analysis and everything as well as that people would do. But neurofeedback to train somebody how to change brain function. If somebody's having extreme anxiety or has become obsessive or something, you can actually work on those things. So
well, by the time the show comes out, the NFL draft will be over, and insert headline here: so and so fell. These rumors happened because they didn't test well or they didn't do this. And, because we did the same type of show last year and we're going to do it again next year. Hey, agents out there,
so
get that EEG.
what what I've got I grew up in Fargo, which is North Dakota State University, and NDSU turns out NFL players
You got a
on a
first rounder. Who's that, Jay?
uh, you know uh,
Nud?
everybody will be able to spot him, Todd, but I don't even remember his real name, but he has no upper teeth ever since middle school,
Yeah.
and he has flaming red hair past his shoulders, and he's got a great attitude, and he's 6'6", 3 something. I mean, he's a giant of a guy, and he'll be drafted early probably, and probably will start his first year. He's played every single position on the line. He's very versatile. People will be able to plug him into an operation real easily, and
Oh,
he's bright and hardworking, and he's not full of himself. He grew up in a town 100 miles outside of Fargo, that a town of like 1,000 people or something. It's a little tiny town. They played 9-man football, and
yeah.
yeah, he played every single sport that there was. When it was in season, they would mow the lawn in front of the house into a baseball diamond or a football field or whatever. So,
Co-
um,
Cody Mock,
yeah,
or Nud. Is it Nud?
Tud,
Tud.
yeah.
Okay. He
Uh,
should go in the
uh,
first round. He's going to have a nice chunk of change.
and and I'm sure. he's not going to go crazy with it. And
Literally.
he's well known as an odd player because the people across from him that he's competing against, when he's face to face with them, he's asking them, "So,
how you doing?
how's the corn crop doing this year? Is your family got horses, or
Yeah.
Anyway, he chats and
Yeah.
develops relationships with the people that he's banging so hard. So um, and they picked him up and basically put him in the weight room, and he gained size. He was still growing.
He was a tight end, and he put on, like, I don't know, 70 pounds in 2 years or some crazy number like that.
Yeah, and grew in another inch.
Yeah.
So anyway, he's going to be an interesting one to watch. But Trey Lance and Carson Wentz, and there's been a string of pros that have spun out of that little tiny town. The program is extremely well supported. And
won a few national titles there.
9 out of 11 in the last 11 years, 9 national titles. Frisco, Texas is called Fargo South. So where the national title game is played. So anyway.
Well, we'll see how North Dakota State does in the draft. We'll see how Colorado does in the draft with the Deion Sanders regime coming in. So plenty of people that'll need a brain scan in the coming weeks.
There's other kinds of testing that sometimes are a little bit off as well. Tera Davis Whitehall.
Okay.
National title long jumper failed the THC test and was stripped of her national title and everything. This is something that's weed. Legal in 20 states, probably medically acceptable in maybe a few others, but it's time for that to be looked at, and like it's a performance enhancer for a long jump. Come on, and apparently it wasn't. Yeah, it was like a trace from a use, not an acute getting stoned at the event or something.
Yeah.
So and to be stripped of a national title, there's a whole series of people that this is tripped up, and it's time for that to be looked at some point.
Well, I don't know if this analogy is valid, but popcorn is to dentistry is what weed is to mental health providers. It'll keep everybody busy. Jake Gunkelman, thank you for another fine episode of the NeuroNoodle Neurofeedback podcast. NFL special. You too, Jay. Say hi to Renita.
You got it. Bye-bye.
All right, buddy. Bye. The NeuroNoodle podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you. Mindmedia.com. Get the latest EEG and neurofeedback technology from mindmedia.com. Their semi-dry sensor cap is a wonder to see, and their EEG amplifiers have been trusted in the field for decades. Their neurofeedback and QEEG courses will get you up to speed in no time. Visit mindmedia.com now.